That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we show that behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Elena gripped the steering wheel of her old Ford, the engine ticking like a weary heartbeat as she pulled into the lot of Sunset Storage. The sun hung low over the industrial sprawl of Reno's outskirts, painting the rows of metal doors in bruised oranges and purples. It was late September, and the air carried that dry bite of autumn, mixed with the faint tang of asphalt baking under the day's heat. Chain-link fences rattled softly in the breeze, enclosing a world of forgotten things, boxes, furniture, lives stacked away like afterthoughts. She cut the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the auction sign propped against the office window. Abandoned units. Bid at your risk. Elena was 42, a single mum with 2 kids who needed more than she could give. Her husband, Tom, had been gone 3 years now, lung cancer that came fast and left her drowning in medical bills. She'd sold the house, moved into a cramped apartment on the edge of town, and scraped by on waitressing shifts at the diner. But the latest notice from the electric company had been the final shove. Pay up or lights out. Her savings? A whopping $200 scraped from tips and overtime. This auction was her Hail Mary, a gamble on someone else's cast-offs turning into cash. The lot was half empty, just a handful of bidders milling about under the buzzing fluorescent lights that flickered on as dusk deepened. Elena stepped out, her sneakers crunching on gravel, and zipped up her faded jacket against the chill. The storage manager, a grizzled man named Hank with a clipboard and a perpetual squint, nodded her way. "First time?" he asked, his voice gravelly from years of chain-smoking. "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile, hoping for luck. He chuckled dryly. "Luck's what got these units locked in the first place. Owners skip town, die, or just forget. You see anything you like?" Elena scanned the list. Units 12 through 18 were up for grabs, contents unknown, but Unit 15 caught her eye. Rent overdue by 8 months, no forwarding address. The photo showed a glimpse through the partially open door, shadows of tall shapes draped in tarps. Furniture? Art? Something she could flip on the local marketplace app? Her heart quickened at the thought. The kids, Lila, 10, with her endless questions about Dad, and Marco, 7, who still wet the bed some nights, deserved better than ramen and second-hand clothes. The bidding started slow, voices echoing off the metal walls like distant thunder. Elena hung back, palms sweaty, until Unit 15 came up. "Starting at 200, Hank called. A couple of regulars raised paddles lazily, but Elena's hand shot up at $450. Her stomach twisted. That was half her nest egg. Bids climbed to $800, then stalled. She countered with $900, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of traffic from the highway beyond the fence. Sold. Hank handed her the key on a ring that jingled like loose change. "Open it whenever. Just clear it out in 30 days or it's lean time again." He paused, eyeing her. Word of advice, sometimes what's inside ain't worth the door. Elena nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. She walked the length of the corridor, the air thick with dust and the faint metallic scent of rust. Fluorescent bulbs overhead cast harsh shadows, making the doors look like sentinels guarding secrets. Unit 15 was midway down, its red paint chipped, a small dent near the lock, like someone had once kicked it in frustration. She inserted the key, the tumblers grinding softly, and pulled the door up with a screech that echoed in the empty space. The interior was dim, cooler than outside, with a musty smell like old canvas and stone. Tarps shrouded tall forms, dozens of them, maybe more, arranged in uneven rows. Not furniture, not boxes, statues, They loomed under the coverings, humanoid shapes with exaggerated limbs, some twisted, others eerily still. One tarp had slipped partially, revealing a face, carved from what looked like marble or plaster, eyes hollowed out, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Elena's breath caught. It wasn't junk. It was something else. Art? Sculptures from some failed gallery dream? Or weirder still, props from a movie set, abandoned when the production folded. She stepped inside, the concrete floor gritty under her shoes, and flicked on her phone's flashlight. The beam danced over the forms. A figure with arms outstretched like it was reaching for something lost. Another crouched as if in prayer, its head bowed under a hood of cloth. Dust motes swirled in the light, and the air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken weight. Who leaves this behind? An artist who'd burned out? Some collector fleeing debts? Her fingers brushed a tarp, feeling the cool hardness beneath. Smooth, almost lifelike. A shiver ran down her spine. This could be valuable, or it could be nothing. Worse, it could be trouble, stolen goods cursed with liens or worse. The sun had dipped fully now, leaving the lot in twilight. Elena locked the door again, the click resounding like a finality. She couldn't unpack it all tonight. The kids were with her sister, waiting for dinner. Driving home, the city lights blurring past, her mind spun. What if these statues were worth thousands? She pictured Lila's face lighting up at a new bike, Marco's room without the peeling wallpaper. But doubt crept in like the evening fog, the dent on the door, the hollow eyes staring back. What if opening them fully revealed something she couldn't unsee? Something that dragged her deeper into the mess she'd been trying to escape. Back in the apartment, Elena heated leftovers and tucked the boys into bed, their small forms curling under threadbare blankets. She sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out like accusations, the key glinting under the single bulb. Sleep evaded her that night. In the quiet hours, she imagined peeling back those tarps, treasures that could rebuild her life, or horrors that would shatter it. The statues whispered in her thoughts, not voices but presences, waiting for her to decide if she had the courage to face them. By dawn, exhaustion won, but resolve flickered. Tomorrow, she'd return, one door at a time. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment, casting long shadows across the cluttered kitchen table. She hadn't slept much, her mind replaying the screech of the storage door, the ghostly outlines under those tarps. Coffee brewed in the old percolator, its gurgle the only sound breaking the pre-dawn hush. Lila and Marco were still asleep, their breaths soft from the shared bedroom down the hall. Eleanor rubbed her eyes, the weight of the night pressing on her like an unpaid debt. The key sat beside her mug, a small brass sentinel mocking her hesitation. She'd driven home in a daze yesterday, the Ford's headlights cutting through the Reno sprawl as neon signs flickered to life along the highway. The city felt indifferent, its pulse quickening while hers stuttered. What had she bought? Not just metal and dust, but echoes. Someone's discarded dreams, perhaps, or regrets too heavy to carry. Tom's voice echoed in her memory, gentle even in illness. "Take the risk, Elle. Life's too short for safe bets." But Tom was gone, and risks now meant more than pride. They meant feeding her kids, keeping the lights on. By the time she pulled into the apartment complex, the sky had bruised to full night. The building loomed, its stucco walls cracked from years of desert sun, laundry swaying on lines like surrendered flags. Inside, the air was stale, laced with the faint scent of yesterday's takeout. Her sister Rosa had left a note on the fridge. "Kids are angels. Call if you need me." Elena had mustered a smile for Lila's bedtime story, a half-remembered tale of hidden treasures, and kissed Marco's forehead, his small hand clutching her sleeve even in sleep. But alone in the living room, the couch sagging under her, the statues invaded her thoughts. She pictured them standing sentinel in the dim unit, tall, shrouded figures with limbs that seemed to twist unnaturally, as if caught mid-motion. Were they marble, like the grand sculptures in the museum she'd taken the kids to once, before bills swallowed such outings? Or cheaper, plaster casts from some artist's fevered workshop? The one she'd glimpsed, with its hollow eyes and screaming mouth, haunted her most. It wasn't beauty, it was raw, almost accusatory, like a face frozen in unspoken pain. What kind of person crafts that? And sculptor unraveling under deadlines, abandoning their work when inspiration fled, or something darker, replicas from a horror exhibit, props stained with the residue of forgotten fears. Doubt coiled tighter as the hours ticked by. The electric bill stared up from the table, red ink screaming urgency. $900 down, and for what? If these were worthless, she'd be back to square one, scraping for shifts at the diner where grease clung to her skin like failure. But if they sold, even a few, she could pay the arrears, maybe enroll Lila in that art class she begged for. The one that reminded Elena of her own stifled dreams before motherhood and marriage reshaped her. Tom had sketched sometimes, simple lines on napkins, dreaming of a quieter life. These statues, could they be that bridge? Or a trap, drawing her into legal tangles? Stolen art, perhaps, or items hot from some shady deal? Sleep came in fits, the apartment's thin walls amplifying the neighbor's TV murmur and the distant wail of a siren. In her half-dreams, the tarps peeled back on their own, revealing not stone but flesh, figures stirring, reaching out with cold fingers. She woke sweating, heart pounding, and checked the lock twice before dawn. No, she told herself, shaking off the chill. It was just exhaustion, the gamble gnawing at her edges. By 7 a.m., she'd roused the kids with pancakes from a mix, their laughter a fragile anchor. "Mommy, did you win the auction?" Lila asked, syrup on her chin, eyes wide with that child's faith in miracles. "Something like that, sweetie," Elena replied, forcing brightness. She dropped them at school, the minivan's radio humming old country tunes about lost loves, then headed back to Sunset Storage. The lot baked under a climbing sun, the air shimmering with heat rising from the pavement. Dust devils swirled near the fence, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant rain that never came. Hank was outside the office, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag that smelled of oil. "Back already," he grunted, leaning on a broom. "Most folks wait a day to regret their bids." Eleanor managed a nod, key in hand. "Need to see what I've got." She walked the corridor alone this time, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a swarm of insects. The doors blurred past, each one a potential story she didn't want. Unit 15 waited, unchanged, its dent a silent scar. She hesitated at the threshold, palm flat against the cool metal, feeling the faint vibration of the world beyond. Tom's words again, "Take the risk." With a deep breath, she turned the key, the lock yielding with a reluctant click. The door rolled up, screeching into the quiet, and sunlight spilled in like an uninvited guest. The unit's interior was a cavern of shadows and forms, the tarps ghostly in the glare. Elena stepped inside, gravel crunching underfoot, and pulled the chain for the overhead bulb. It buzzed to life, casting a sterile glow over the rows. There were at least 20 statues, some 7 feet tall, others squat and hunched, all draped but for a few edges where cloth had frayed. The air was cooler here, laced with a dry, powdery scent like chalk and aged wood, and something sharper, almost metallic, lingering beneath. She approached the nearest one, heart thudding. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the tarp's edge, the fabric rough and dusty. Pulling it back slowly, inch by inch, revealed a figure, a woman, life-sized, carved from pale stone that gleamed dully. Her arms were crossed protectively over her chest, face tilted upward as if beseeching the heavens, but her eyes, deep sockets empty, stared through Elena with blind accusation. The detail was exquisite, veins etched in the neck, folds in a simple dress that suggested movement frozen in time. Not mass-produced junk. This was handcrafted, deliberate. Emboldened, Eleanor moved to the next, a crouched man with elongated fingers splayed on his knees, head bowed in what looked like despair. Dust coated its surface, but beneath, the stone felt smooth, almost warm from the unit's trapped heat. She wiped a smudge from its cheek, revealing faint cracks like scars from rough handling. Who made these? An artist pouring grief into rock, then walking away when it became too real. The thought stirred something in her, a kinship perhaps with her own buried hurts, but unease prickled too. These weren't cheerful nudes or abstract swirls. They were raw, human in their torment, as if sculpted from nightmares. Further in, the forms grew stranger. One with limbs twisted like branches in a storm, another with multiple faces emerging from a single torso, mouths agape in silent chorus. Elena's flashlight pierced the gloom at the back, where a smaller statue sat apart, partially uncovered. It was a child, no more than 3 feet tall, holding a broken toy, its expression serene amid the chaos. Her breath hitched, like Marco, frozen in innocence. She reached out, then pulled back, the unit suddenly feeling too confined, the air thick with unspoken stories. By midday, sweat beaded on her forehead, the heat seeping in despite the shade. She'd uncovered 6 each more intricate, more unsettling than the last. No tags, no crates, just these silent witnesses stacked like forgotten souls. Valuable? Maybe to a gallery or collector. But the coherence unnerved her. This wasn't a hoarder's mess. It was a collection, abandoned with purpose. As she paused, tarp in hand, a shadow fell across the doorway. Hank stood there, arms crossed, his squint deepening as he took in the scene. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, stepping closer. "Those ain't your garden gnomes. You got yourself a crypt of weirdos in here." His voice carried a mix of awe and wariness, and for the first time, Eleanor felt the isolation crack, just a little. Hank's boots scraped the concrete as he edged into the unit, the overhead bulb casting jagged shadows that danced across the uncovered statues like uneasy spirits. Eleanor straightened, wiping dust from her hands onto her jeans, her pulse still echoing from the discoveries. The air hung heavy between them, thick with the powdery residue of stone and the faint acrid tang of old sweat from the enclosed space. Outside, the sun climbed higher, turning the lot into a furnace, but inside Unit 15 it felt timeless, suspended in a hush broken only by the distant rumble of a truck on the highway. "Seen a lot in my 20 years here," Hank said, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might wake the figures. He circled the nearest statue, the woman with her arms crossed, eyes hollow and pleading, and tilted his head, squinting at the intricate carving of her fingers, clenched in quiet defiance. Furniture, cars in pieces, even a whole damn boat once. But this is something out of a museum. Or a madhouse. He reached out tentatively, his calloused palm hovering inches from the stone, then pulled back. "You touch 'em yet? Feel real, don't they? Not like them cheap fiberglass jobs." Elena nodded, her throat tight. "Yeah, too real." She glanced at the child statue again, its serene face a stark contrast to the twisted forms around it. The toy in its hands, a fractured wooden horse, seemed almost playful, a remnant of whimsy amid the torment. Her mind flashed to Marco's drawings, scribbled horses on the margins of his homework, dreams unmarred by the world's sharp edges. "I thought maybe art supplies or props, but they're alive somehow, like the artist's still in them." Hank grunted, moving to the crouched man, its elongated fingers splayed as if grasping at invisible threads. He tugged the tarp fully off with a rough yank, revealing more. The figure's back etched with what looked like whip marks, faint lines scarring the stone like healed wounds. Dust billowed up, catching in the light, and Elena coughed, waving it away. "Careful," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Part of her wanted to cover them all back up, seal the door, and walk away from this peculiar inheritance. The other part, the desperate one, clung to the possibility of value, a lifeline out of the red ink abyss. He stepped back, rubbing his chin, the stubble rasping under his fingers. Heard stories about units like this, artist types. They rent cheap space out here when the city's too pricey, pour their souls into work, then life hits, divorce, debts, whatever, and poof, gone. But these... His eyes narrowed on the multi-faced torso, its mouths frozen in a chorus of silent agony. Ain't no happy stuff. Looks like pain carved out and left to rot. You check for marks, signatures, dates? Elena shook her head, regret twisting in her gut. She'd been too overwhelmed yesterday, too quick to lock it away. Now, with Hank's steady presence anchoring her, she knelt by the woman's base, fingers tracing the smooth pedestal. There, faintly etched in the stone. E. Voss, 2018. Initials, a year. Not much, but enough to humanize it. Elias Voss? Emma? The name tugged at something vague, a whisper from a local news blip years back, but exhaustion blurred the edges. She pulled out her phone, snapping photos of the statues, the light glinting off the lens like a warning. Smart, Hank approved, though his tone carried caution. Document it all. If these are legit, could be worth a mint to some collector. Galleries in Vegas pay top dollar for the weird and wounded. He paused, glancing toward the open door where heat waves shimmered beyond. But if they're hot, stolen from a show or worse, custom jobs for some shady film crew, could bring trouble. Cops, liens, folks coming knocking with claims. The word trouble landed like a stone in her chest. Elena imagined sirens cutting through the night, blue lights flashing on her apartment windows, Lila and Marco wide-eyed in confusion. Or worse, angry shadows from the past, whoever Voss was, tracking her down for what she'd unearthed. Her hands trembled as she uncovered another, a towering figure with arms outstretched, palms upturned as if offering absolution, but its face contorted in rage. Brows furrowed deep. The stone here felt different, darker, veined with quartz that caught the bulb's glow like veins of lightning. She brushed away grit, revealing a small plaque embedded at the neck. The burden. Hank whistled softly. Poetic or pretentious, either way, not junk. He leaned against the wall, the metal creaking under his weight, and fixed her with a steady gaze. Look, Elena, I remember you from the auction. Single mom, right? Kids waiting at home. This ain't just a score, it's a crossroads. You want to sell 'em quick. I know a guy at the flea market who deals in oddities, but if it's deeper, maybe call the Arts Council, see if Voss rings bells. Don't rush. One wrong move and that $900 turns into handcuffs. She met his eyes, seeing not pity, but the quiet wisdom of someone who'd watched lives pivot on forgotten doors. Hank wasn't family, not even a friend yet, but in this dim corridor of metal and mystery, he felt like an ally, grounded, unflinching. "What would you do?" she asked, voice barely above the hum of the lights. He shrugged, a small smile cracking his weathered face. "Me? I'd dig a little. Truth's usually kinder than the shadows you imagine, but protect what's yours first. Family comes before stone." He straightened, dusting his hands. "I'll leave you to it. Holler if you need a hand hauling one out, though these look heavy as sin." As he embarked, the unit felt emptier, the statue's stares more insistent. Elena lingered, the air settling around her like a held breath. The burden, it echoed her own, bills piling like unspoken accusations, nights wondering if Tom would be proud of her fight. But Hank's words stirred a resolve, fragile but real. She couldn't pretend this away. The forms demanded reckoning. By afternoon, she'd uncovered most. The space transformed into a gallery of ghosts, twisted lovers embracing in eternal conflict, a lone wanderer with eyes blindfolded by cloth, each piece whispering of abandonment. Sweat soaked her shirt, the heat pressing in as the sun arced overhead. She sat on an upturned crate at the back, phone in hand, searching E. Voss sculptor Reno. Hits flickered. A local artist, Elias Voss, known for emotional realism, works exploring grief, loss. Disappeared in 2019 after a gallery show tanked. Whispers of depression, unpaid rents. No theft reports, but his pieces had vanished with him. Elena's heart ached, not crime, but a man unraveling, leaving his pain behind like shed skin. Yet one statue remained shrouded in the corner, smaller than the rest, its tarp intact and oddly pristine. She approached slowly, the concrete cool under her knees, and peeled it back. Beneath was a portrait bust, not twisted but tender. A woman's face, mid-30s, with soft features and a faint smile, eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep. Inscribed at the base, "For M. Always, EV 2017. Marble, polished to a gentle sheen, it felt warm to the touch, alive with memory. Elena's breath caught. This wasn't torment. It was love preserved in stone, a wife, a muse. The shift reframed everything, not a crypt, but a sanctuary abandoned in despair. Tears pricked her eyes, unbidden. For the first time, hope flickered amid the fear, not just for profit, but for understanding. This one statue, serene and whole, promised that even in the weird and broken, something pure endured. She covered it gently, the fabric whispering against stone, and stepped out into the blinding light, the door rattling shut behind her. The moral weight settled deeper. Keep silent and sell, or seek the truth for Elias Voss's ghost. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The afternoon sun beat down on the storage lot like a relentless interrogator, turning the asphalt into a shimmering trap that clung to Elena's sneakers as she paced outside Unit 15. The door stood half open, a jagged mouth exhaling cool, dusty air that carried the faint, chalky whisper of stone. Inside, the statues loomed in their partial unveiling, their forms casting elongated shadows across the concrete floor under the harsh, fluorescent hum. Elena's hands still tingled from touching the bust, the one with the serene woman's face, eyes closed in eternal peace. For M. Always. The inscription burned in her mind, a quiet anchor amid the twisted gallery of grief she'd uncovered. She'd lingered too long after Hank left, the unit's confines pressing in like the walls of her own doubts. The search results on her phone had painted a picture of Elias Voss, a sculptor in his late 40s, Reno native, who'd risen briefly in the local art scene with pieces that bared the soul's fractures, as one old review put it. His 2018 show, Echoes of Absence, had drawn crowds to a downtown gallery, critics praising the raw emotion, patrons whispering about the artist's haunted gaze during the opening. Then, silence. No new works after 2019. Rumors swirled in online forums, a breakdown after his wife's death from cancer, the same thief that had stolen Tom from her. Voss had vanished, rent unpaid, studio cleared out overnight. No body, no note. Just echoes. But the statues, they matched descriptions from grainy photos in archived articles, the outstretched arms of supplication, the multi-faced chorus of lament. Valuable, yes. Pieces had sold for 5 figures back then. Yet abandonment like this screamed unfinished business. Elena glanced at her phone again, the battery icon blinking low. A quick call to the Arts Council had yielded little. Voss? Haven't heard that name in years. Check with the family, if any. Family. The bust suggested a wife, M, gone before him. Who inherited? Who might come claiming? The moral knot tightened in her chest. A slow burn of fear and temptation. Sell them piecemeal at the flea market, as Hank suggested. Quick cash for the electric bill. New shoes for the kids. Or dig deeper, risk exposing whatever shadows Voss left behind. What if these weren't just art, but confessions, the twisted limbs, the scarred backs, subtle implications of struggle, not violence, but pain etched deep. Elena imagined Lila stumbling on a news clipping about Voss's disappearance. Her daughter's innocent questions piercing like the hollow eyes of those stone figures. No, she couldn't drag her family into uncertainty. But walking away, that felt like betrayal to Voss's memory and her own fraying resolve. A gravelly cough pulled her from the spiral. Hank reappeared at the corridor's end, toolbox in hand, his shirt darkened with sweat patches. "Forgot my wrench in there earlier," he said, but his eyes scanned her face, reading the tension like weather-worn signs. He stepped inside without invitation, the door rattling softly behind him. The air shifted with his presence, practical, unyielding, cutting through the unit's oppressive stillness. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Find something under those tarps besides rock." Elena hesitated, then nodded toward the back corner where the bus sat, its tarp draped loosely now, the woman's faint smile catching the light like a secret shared. "This one, it's different, personal, and the artist's name, Elias Voss. He disappeared after his wife died." Her voice cracked on the last word, Tom's absence echoing in the parallel loss. She pulled out her phone, showing the search hits, faded gallery invites, a blurry headshot of Voss, lean face, eyes shadowed even in youth. Hank whistled low, setting his toolbox down with a metallic clink that echoed off the walls. He approached the bust slowly, his broad frame dwarfing it, and traced the inscription with a dirt-streaked finger. "For M, always. Cancer, huh? Same as a lot of folks round here? Mill smoke? Bad luck." He straightened, rubbing his neck, the gesture weary. "Knew a fella like that once. Carpenter, lost his girl to the same. Built a whole room of birdhouses after, then burned 'em all one night. Said it was easier than holding the hurt." His gaze swept the rows, the burdened figure with its raging face, the child with the broken toy. These ain't just pretty. They're therapy. Or punishment. Voss probably rented this unit to hide 'em when the world got too loud. The words landed heavy, stirring the dust motes into lazy swirls. Elena felt exposed, the statue's presences amplifying her own buried grief. The night she'd sobbed into Tom's pillow, the way Marco's bedwetting spiked on anniversaries. But what if someone's looking for them, or him? I can't just profit off pain. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails biting palms. The temptation clawed back, $900 spent, kids' faces at breakfast, the diner's endless shift. Keep silent, sell quietly, or call authorities, invite scrutiny that could unravel her fragile stability. Hank leaned against a shrouded form, the tarp rustling like dry leaves. "Moral crossroads, ain't it? Seen bidders before you, retirees chasing gold, finding skeletons instead. One guy unearthed old love letters, turned 'em over to a widow, cost him a payday but slept better." He paused, the hum of the lights filling the quiet. "Me? I'd track the thread. Voss had a sister, maybe, from what I recall hearing, or the gallery owner. Get the story straight before you decide. But watch your back. Art world's got vultures. Folks hear about valuable finds. They circle." Fear prickled anew, sharp as the unit's metallic undercurrent. Elena imagined knocks at her door after dark, claims of ownership or worse. Whispers of Voss's end not being voluntary, the statue's witnesses to something unresolved. She covered the bust again, fingers lingering on the fabric, protective. What if it's dangerous, not just legal, personal, like opening a door you can't close? Hank's eyes softened, the squint easing. Then you got choices, bolt it shut or step through with eyes open. Courage ain't flashy, Elena. It's hauling what you find without breaking. He picked up his wrench, the tool glinting cold. "I'll help you move a couple out tomorrow if you want. Neutral ground, my garage, gives you space to think. As he left, the door's screech marked his exit, leaving Elena alone with the forms. The sun dipped lower, casting the corridor in golden haze, the chain-link fence beyond, rattling like uneasy thoughts. She locked up, the click final, and drove home through Reno's fading light, the highway's hum a distant lullaby. Dinner was quiet, pasta from a can, Lila sketching horses at the table, Marco chattering about school. But Elena's mind wandered back to the unit, the bust's smile a beacon in the weirdness. That night, sleep fractured again. Dreams wove Voss into her world, him carving in the dim light, chisel strikes echoing her heartbeat, the statues coming alive to plead for release. She woke to the apartment's clock ticking 2 a.m. Bills scattered like fallen leaves. On impulse, she searched deeper. Obituaries, forums. M. Voss, Marion, died 2017. No kids mentioned. Elias's sister, Clara, listed in an old directory, a nurse in Sparks. A phone number outdated but a start. Dawn broke hazy, the desert air thick with promise and peril. Elena dropped the kids at school, their backpacks swinging like small freedoms, then returned to the lot. Hank was there, coffee in hand, nodding approval as she recounted her plan. Call Clara, document everything. But as she reopened the door, a new detail caught her eye, scratched into the wall near the bust. Forgive the wait. Fresh? No, faded but overlooked. The escalation hit. Not just art, but a message. Voss's final words. Her resolve hardened, laced with dread. The statues weren't ending her story. They were rewriting it, one moral fracture at a time. The desert wind whispered through the chain-link fence as Elena pulled into Sunset Storage that morning, the Ford's tires crunching over scattered gravel like brittle bones. The sky hung low and overcast, a rare Nevada gloom that muted the sun's usual glare, casting the rows of metal doors in a flat, unforgiving grey. The air smelled of impending rain, damp earth mingling with the ever-present rust and oil from the units, and Elena's jacket felt too thin against the chill that seeped into her bones. She'd barely slept. The scratched words, "Forgive the wait," replaying in her mind like a half-heard confession, etched not just into the wall, but into her resolve. The kids had been oblivious at breakfast, Lila chattering about a school project on local artists, while Marco smeared jam on toast, his small world untroubled by the shadows Elena carried. But as she waved goodbye at the school drop-off, the weight pressed harder, the moral fracture widening. Call Clara Voss, expose the find, risk it all slipping away, or quietly appraise, sell what she could, and let the past stay buried. Tom's voice haunted her again, soft from memory. Do what's right, even when it hurts. Right for who? Her family, scraping by on diner tips and faded dreams? Or for a ghost who'd poured his soul into stone? Hank was already at the office, nursing a thermos of coffee that steamed in the cool air, his face etched deeper by the low light. He nodded as she approached, the fluorescent sign above the door buzzing faintly like a persistent doubt. You look determined. Talked to that sister yet? Eleanor shook her head, pulling the outdated number from her pocket. Scrawled on a diner napkin during her break. Not yet. Figured I'd document more first. That message on the wall. It's like he knew someone would find this. Her voice trembled, the words tasting of dust. She led him to Unit 15, the key cold in her palm, and rolled the door up with a screech that echoed down the empty corridor. Inside, the statues stood sentinel in the dimness, their forms half shadow, half substance under the overhead bulb she flicked on. The powdery scent enveloped her immediately, chalk and stone laced with something sharper now, perhaps the faint metallic tang of fear sweat from her own yesterday's toil. Hank stepped in behind her, his boots thudding softly, and they worked in companionable silence at first. Elena uncovered the remaining tarps with careful pulls, the fabric whispering against the figures like reluctant secrets. One more emerged, a pair entwined, man and woman locked in an embrace that was both tender and tormented. their faces pressed close, eyes wide in mutual despair, hands clutching as if against an invisible tide. Dust swirled in the stirred air, catching the light in lazy eddies, and Elena's fingers traced the join where their forms merged, seamless stone, speaking of unity forged in loss. "Marion and Elias," she murmured, the pieces clicking. The bust's serenity now framed this agony, a love story carved before grief twisted it. "Powerful stuff," Hank said, his voice gravelly, as he photographed the pair with his old flip phone, the flash popping like distant lightning. He moved methodically, no nonsense, his presence a steady counter to the unit's unease. "Reminds me of my ex. Built walls instead of breaking them down. Voss, he let it all out here." He paused at the scratched message, crouching to rub his thumb over the faint grooves. "Old, all right, 5 years maybe, not fresh vandalism, man's last note to the world." Elena's stomach knotted as she knelt beside him, the concrete biting through her jeans. The words, "forgive the wait," seemed to pulse under the bulb's hum, a plea or apology. Forgive what? The abandonment? The art left to moulder? Or something deeper, unspoken? She thought of her own burdens, the medical debt that lingered like a shadow, the way Lila's eyes dimmed when bills arrived, Marco's quiet pleas for just one new toy. These statues could lift that. Appraisals online hinted at $2,000 per piece for Voss's style, enough for stability, a fresh start. But claiming them felt like theft from the dead, profiting on pain she knew too well. By noon, the unit was fully revealed, a macabre gallery under the stark light, 23 statues in all. From the child's innocence to the chorus of faces wailing silently. No crates, no shipping labels, just raw creation, stacked haphazardly, as if Voss had hauled them here in a frenzy, then fled. Elena sat on the upturned crate, phone in hand, dialing Clara's number with fingers that shook. The line rang endlessly, each tone stretching the tension. The distant traffic hum beyond the fence, a mocking reminder of normal life moving on. Finally, a click. "Hello?" The voice was cautious, edged with the weariness of a nurse's shift. Clara Voss, 50-something, from the directory photo Elena had found. "This is Elena Ramirez. I bought a storage unit in Reno. Unit 15 at Sunset Storage. It was your brother's." Silence stretched, broken only by Elena's ragged breath. She described the find, the statues, the bust, the inscription, words tumbling out in a rush, the air in the unit suddenly too thick. Clara's intake of breath was sharp, audible over the line. "Elias! God, those pieces! He locked them away after Marion died, said they were too heavy, too much of her in them." Her voice cracked, then steadied. "I tried finding him after he vanished. Police said adult, no foul play, just gone. The unit, rent kept coming from an account till it ran dry. I couldn't face it." A pause, heavy as the stone around them. "They're his life's work, worth a lot, but bring them to me, please, for closure." Elena's heart pounded, the phone slick in her grip. Closure for Clara, yes. But what of her own? Hand them over, and the $900 vanished, debts unchanged. Keep them, sell legally as abandoned property, and guilt would carve her hollow like Voss's figures. Hank watched from the doorway, arms crossed, his nod subtle encouragement. "Tell her the truth," he mouthed, the wind rattling the fence outside like impatient fingers. "I want to," Elena said finally, voice steadying. "But I have kids. This was my last shot at something better." The confession hung, raw and vulnerable, the bulb flickering overhead as if in sympathy. Clara softened. "I get it. Loss changes everything. Meet me tomorrow. We'll talk value, rights. Elias would want them seen, not hidden." The call ended with a promise, a cafe in Sparks, neutral ground, and Elena pocketed the phone. The unit's shadows lengthening as clouds thickened outside. Hank clapped her shoulder gently, the gesture warm against the chill. You did right. First step's the hardest. But as they locked up, the doors clang resounding like a gavel, doubt surged back. What if Clara claimed it all, or worse, revealed Voss's end tied to something darker, debts, a breakdown that turned desperate? The statue's weight followed her home, the Ford's engine groaning in echo, Reno's outskirts blurring into twilight. Dinner waited, simple tacos, kids' laughter a balm. But Eleanor's mind raced ahead to tomorrow's crossroads, where forgiveness and survival collided in the quiet spaces between stone and heart. The weird had become personal, and turning back felt impossible. The morning broke with a hesitant sun, piercing the overcast veil that had shrouded Reno the night before. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary as she navigated the Ford toward Sparks, the highway unspooling like a frayed thread between her world and the unknown. The air through the cracked window carried the sharp scent of sagebrush and exhaust, mingling with the faint, lingering chalkiness on her clothes from yesterday's delving into Unit 15. Sleep had been a shallow trench, haunted by the statue's silent vigil, the entwined lovers clutching in despair, the child's broken toy a mirror to Marco's fragile joys. Clara's voice on the phone replayed in loops. For closure. But closure for whom? Elena's debts loomed like the industrial silos dotting the horizon. Unyielding and indifferent, she'd left the kids with Rosa again, Lila's backpack heavy with school books, Marco's small hand waving from the apartment steps. "Be brave, Mommy," he'd said, echoing words she'd once whispered to him during thunderstorms. Brave. The word tasted bitter now, laced with the fear that this meeting could strip away her gamble, leaving her $900 investment as dust. Hank had texted before dawn, "Drive safe. Truth's a two-way street." His garage offer still stood, a quiet lifeline, but today was about facing the echoes head-on. The cafe in Sparks, a nondescript spot off the main drag, with vinyl booths cracked from years of spills, loomed in her GPS, its parking lot half full under buzzing sodium lights even in daylight. Clara Voss waited at a corner table, nursing a black coffee that steamed like unspoken regrets. She was compact, her nurse's scrubs faded blue, hair pulled back in a practical knot that did little to hide the lines of exhaustion around her eyes. Mid-50s, Elena guessed, with Elias's shadowed gaze from the old photos. No warmth in her posture, just a guarded stillness, like someone who'd long ago learned to brace for loss. "Elena," she said, rising slightly, her handshake firm but cool, calloused from hospital shifts. The cafe hummed around them, forks clinking on plates, the sizzle of bacon from the grill, a radio murmuring weather updates about scattered showers. It felt absurdly normal, a counterpoint to the stone weights pressing on Elena's chest. They ordered tea for Elena, untouched, and Clara wasted no time. "Show me the photos." Elena slid her phone across the Formica table, the screen glowing with images, the burdened figure's raging face, the multi-faced chorus, the bust of Marion with her peaceful smile. Clara's breath hitched at the last, her finger tracing the inscription. "That's her," before the cancer hollowed her out. Her voice was steady, but tears welled unbidden, spilling onto the table like rain on pavement. Elias carved it the year they met, said it captured her light after she died. He changed. The statues turned dark, like he was sculpting his own unraveling. Elena leaned in, the vinyl booth creaking under her, the scent of greasy hash browns turning her stomach. He disappeared in 2019. The unit's been locked since. She described the find in hushed tones, the dented door, the tarps heavy with dust, the scratched "forgive the wait" like a final exhale. Clara nodded, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. Yes. After the gallery flop, he withdrew. Marion's treatments bankrupted them, debts piled like his unfinished works. I begged him to sell some pieces, start over, but he said they were her, trapped in stone. One night he loaded the truck, kissed my cheek and drove off. Rent payments stopped 6 months later. Police called it voluntary. No signs of foul play, just a man chasing ghosts. The deeper truth unfolded like a tarp, peeling back, reframing the weird collection from criminal enigma to human wreckage. Not stolen art, but a widow's lament. Elias, mirroring Elena's own grief for Tom, pouring agony into marble until it crushed him. The twisted limbs weren't menace. They were metaphors for the fractures of loss, the scarred back, a subtle nod to battles fought in silence. Clara pulled a worn envelope from her purse, yellowed at the edges. A letter from Elias, dated 2018. He left this with me in case. Never thought it'd come to this. She slid it over, her hand trembling slightly. Elena unfolded it carefully, the paper crackling like dry leaves. Elias's script was jagged, urgent. Clara, if I go quiet, know the statues are my confession. Marion's gone, and I'm hollowed too. Can't sell them. Feels like burying her again. But the weight. Forgive me for leaving it behind. Maybe someone finds them, sees the beauty in the break. Tears blurred the ink, Eleanor's own mixing in as she read. Beauty in the break. It echoed her life. The diner shifts that chipped her spirit. The kids' laughter mending the cracks. These weren't just objects. They were a bridge from despair to something redemptive if she chose it. The moral crossroads sharpened, the cafe's fluorescent buzz amplifying the tension. Hand everything to Clara, rightful heir perhaps, and walk away empty-handed, integrity intact but survival teetering. Or claim abandoned property rights, appraise and sell through legal channels, turning Voss's pain into her family's hope. What now? Elena asked, voice thick, folding the letter back. They're valuable. Galleries might pay enough to change things for me. Clara's eyes met hers, compassionate but firm. I won't fight you. Elias would hate them gathering dust. But document, authenticate, make it honest. There's a curator in town who knew him. She'll verify. Split it fair. For your kids, for closure. The offer hung. A fragile truce, the rain starting outside in patters against the window, blurring the world beyond. Elena's heart raced, fear coiling with possibility. Calling the police now would end it cleanly, but expose her to questions, delays, pretending ignorance tempted. But the letter burned in her pocket like accusation. Hank's advice echoed, find the whole truth. This was it, not danger, but duty to unfinished lives. Okay, she said, resolve settling like dust after a storm. We'll do it right. Tomorrow, the curator. Then Nadine, whatever comes. Clara nodded, a small smile breaking through, the first crack in her armor. They parted with numbers exchanged, the rain slicking the lot as Elena dashed to the ford. Driving back, the wipers slapping rhythmically, the statues felt less like burdens, more like allies in the quiet fight. Home waited, dinner smells wafting from the apartment. Leela's drawings on the fridge, but the crossroads lingered, courage blooming in the downpour. One more door to open, and this time she'd step through whole. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The rain had cleared by the time Elena returned to Sunset Storage the next morning, leaving the lot slick and reflective under a tentative blue sky. Puddles mirrored the rows of metal doors, distorting their red facades into watery smears, and the air hung crisp with the scent of wet asphalt and revived sagebrush. Her Ford idled at the edge of the corridor, engine humming softly like a held breath as she gathered the last of her notes. Photos, the letter from Elias, a borrowed dolly from Hank's garage. The statues waited inside Unit 15, their stone forms no longer shrouded strangers but known presences, heavy with borrowed histories. Clara would arrive soon with the curator in tow, and the weight of decision pressed on Elena like the damp chill seeping through her jacket. She'd barely slept again, The apartment filled with the quiet rhythms of her family. Lila's soft snores from the couch. Marco curled against her side after a nightmare about scary rocks. The kid's innocence anchored her, a reminder that this crossroads wasn't abstract. It was about the lunch money she'd slip into Lila's backpack tomorrow, the new sneakers Marco needed before winter bit. Tom's ring, worn smooth on her finger, caught the dashboard light as she killed the engine. "We're doing this right," she whispered to the empty cab, the words a vow against the temptation that had whispered all night. Pocket a few pieces, sell quietly, let survival trump the ghosts. Hank emerged from the office, wiping his hands on a rag that smelled of oil and coffee, his squint easing into a nod of solidarity. Curator's punctual type. Parked the truck out back, easier for hauling if it comes to that. He didn't press for details, just handed her a thermos of hot tea, steam curling like morning mist. In the days since their first talk, Hank had become more than a bystander, a quiet guide, his garage now stacked with the lighter statues, tarps folded neatly, as if the figures had found temporary sanctuary. "You tell Clara about the split?" Elena sipped the tea, its warmth grounding her against the corridor's echoey hush. "Yeah, 50-50 after authentication. Legal sale through the gallery, taxes, all of it." The words felt foreign, honest in their structure, but the fear lingered. What if the value fell short? Appraisals from online comps promised $40-$100 total, give or take. Life-changing for her half, enough to clear debts and breathe. But Elias's letter, tucked in her pocket, warned against greed. Beauty in the break, not the shatter. Clara arrived first. Her nurse's scrubs swapped for a simple sweater, face drawn but resolute under the climbing sun. The curator followed in a compact SUV, a woman named Dr. Reyes, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with a notebook clutched like a shield. She introduced herself with a firm handshake, her voice carrying the clipped precision of academia. Voss's work, undervalued even in his prime, these could redefine his legacy. They entered the unit together, the door rolling up with its familiar screech, sunlight spilling over the remaining forms like a spotlight on a stage, long dark. The inspection unfolded methodically, the air thick with the powdery residue of stone and the faint, musty undercurrent of years sealed away. Dr. Reyes moved among the statues, her flashlight beam tracing etched details, the vein-like cracks in the burdened figure's arms, the subtle play of light on Marion's bust that suggested breath-frozen mid-exhale. "Exquisite emotional depth," she murmured, snapping photos, her notebook filling with notes on provenance, the unit's auction records, Elena's purchase docs, Clara's familial claim. No red flags, abandoned property laws favor the finder here, but with heir involvement, it's equitable. Gallery auction in 2 months. Estimates start at $50,000. Clara's hand trembled as she touched the entwined lovers, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. He captured us all in these. The weight he forgave. Maybe now we can. Elena stood back, heart thudding against her ribs, the concrete floor cool under her shoes. The decision crystallized in that moment. Not a dramatic flourish, but a quiet alignment. Document. Authenticate. Release. No shadows of theft or silence, just clarity cutting through the moral haze. They'd haul the rest to Hank's that afternoon, prepare for the sale. Proceeds split, Clara donating her share to a local grief center, Elena earmarking hers for stability and something more. By evening, the unit stood half empty, the dolly's wheels rumbling like reluctant confessions as the last statue, the child with the broken toy, joined the others in Hank's garage. The space echoed hollowly now, walls scarred with faint outlines where forms had leaned, dust settling in the quiet. Elena paused at the threshold, the fluorescent hum overhead fading as dusk crept in. The chain-link fence beyond, silhouetted against the sunset's bruised hues. Hank lingered nearby, toolbox at his feet. You chose well, he said simply, his voice gravel over the wind's whisper. Takes guts to lift the weight instead of burying it. Weeks blurred into a rhythm of cautious hope. The auction drew quiet buzz. Local papers ran pieces on the rediscovered Voss, framing it as redemption for a lost artist, not scandal. Elena's half-cleared $28,000 after fees, electric paid, medical debt settled, a down payment on a modest house with a yard for the kids. No more cramped apartment, mornings now filled with Lila's art supplies spilling across a real table, Marco's laughter chasing fireflies in the grass. She enrolled in night classes, art history. Of all things, Voss's influence stirring a long-dormant spark, her sketches tentative but alive. Hank became a fixture, Sunday barbecues at the new place, his stories of the lot weaving into family lore. Clara visited once, the bust of Marion now in her living room, a bridge mended in shared silence. No villains emerged, no lurking criminals, just the understated justice of truths unearthed. Eleanor's fear ebbed, replaced by a quiet courage, the kind that rebuilds from fragments. Months later, she returned to Unit 15 one final time, the key heavy in her palm despite the cleared lean. The door rolled up to emptiness, bare concrete, faint chalk ghosts on the walls, the air fresh with disuse and the distant tang of warm asphalt. Sunlight poured in unhindered, illuminating the scratched "Forgive the Wait" like a healed scar. Elena stood there, jacket unzipped against the spring breeze, the hum of traffic a gentle underscore to her reflection. Doors, once locked against her, now open to possibility. The weird statues a turning point, proving that in the industrial quiet, hearts could still mend. Her phone buzzed. A text from Hank. "Dinner tonight. Bring the kids." She smiled, pocketing it, and locked the door one last time. Some risks changed everything, not with fanfare, but with the steady grace of choosing light over shadow. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of single mom bought a storage unit full of weird statues. One of them changed everything. See you in the next one.